Donald Trump has hailed the NATO defence spending commitments as a big win. He also earned a new nickname from NATO's Secretary-General, who described him as Daddy, after the US President likened the Israel-Iran war to two kids in a schoolyard.
They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to
use strong language.
Our Europe correspondent Elias Kluwer is in The Hague and he joins us now. G'day, Elias. Now, NATO leaders have agreed to lift defence spending to 5% of GDP annually. What's the significance of this?
Good morning, James and Bridget. Well, a number of reasons, and it starts with this campaign of flattery, which you've touched on there, James, which is being led by the Secretary-General of NATO, Mark Rutte, when Donald Trump was describing the Israel-Iran conflict as two kids playing in a schoolyard. As you mentioned, Mr Rutte intervened in quite a bizarre fashion, referring to Mr Trump as Daddy. That campaign of flattery, though, and the gushing sort of effusive admiration for Donald Trump didn't end there. In fact, in any opportunity he could, he would praise Donald Trump's decisive action, what he called decisive action in Iran, and basically heaped all the credit of NATO nations lifting their spending on defence to Donald Trump. And this is why it's significant. Mr Trump has been a constant critic of NATO and has been pushing for, in particular, the European nations to lift their defence spend. Now, the fact that Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General of NATO, has been successful in getting all but one NATO nation to agree to that is quite an achievement, and Donald Trump has chalked this up as a big win. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
In a very historic milestone this week, the NATO allies committed to dramatically increase their defense spending to that 5% of GDP, something that no one really thought possible. And they said, "You did it, sir, you did it." Well, I don't know if I did it, but I think I did.
There you go. And Elias, tell us, what are the key takeaways for Australia from this summit, do you think?
Well, the representative for Australia at this NATO summit was Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles, who said he had a number of bilateral meetings with contemporaries, other defence ministers within the NATO alliance. The most important, perhaps, was his sit-down with the Defence Minister of Ukraine, where he committed to sending a Wedgetail aircraft to Europe in August. He also committed to imposing new sanctions on Russia, which focus on 37 individuals and 7 different entities that sort of range across energy and different economic aspects there. So it's basically a way that Australia, in a small way, can try and restrict Russia bankrolling its war effort. Let's have a listen to Richard Marles as he describes what the Wedgetail will do in the Ukraine theatre.
We've had this deployment previously. It was very much welcomed in terms of supporting the decision-making that occurs across the domain, including, obviously, Ukraine.
Now, you might remember, James, that the G7 summit, Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, was set to meet with Donald Trump, and of course he snubbed the PM because he left that summit early. Now, Donald Trump was set to meet with Indo-Pacific partners at this NATO summit, but he withdrew from that meeting the night before. Now, I asked Richard Marles whether he met with the US Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, and he said no. So, once again, the Australians left off the Americans' itinerary, but someone who wasn't was the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who had an audience with the president today. He was dressed in formal wear, which is pretty rare for Volodymyr Zelenskyy these days. He met with Donald Trump for 50 minutes. Donald Trump said they discussed the progress of the war. He said that Volodymyr Zelenskyy was very nice to him. He said they had a great discussion. It's the first time they met since that very spectacular, dramatic display of diplomacy at the Vatican. And before that, of course, there was that episode, shall we say, at the White House. So it's unclear when they'll meet next, but it seems as if the relationship between the pair is mending.